The story begins under a brooding, storm-charged sky as a car winds its way down a neglected road, its headlights cutting through the thick mist that clings to the overgrown path. The asylum looms in the distance, a monstrous silhouette of crumbling brick and shattered windows, its very presence radiating a sense of dread. The protagonists, a group of paranormal investigators, or perhaps curious urban explorers, step out of the vehicle, their breaths visible in the cold air. The moment their feet touch the cracked asphalt of the asylum's parking lot, an unnatural silence settles around them, as though the land itself is holding its breath. The leader of the group, often a rational skeptic, cracks a joke to ease the tension, but the laughter is hollow. The believer among them, however, feels it immediately, the weight of unseen eyes watching from the asylum's blackened windows. A gust of wind howls through the broken eaves, sounding eerily like a distant scream. The historian of the group, armed with old records, recounts the asylum's grim reputation, whispers of patient abuse, unexplained deaths, and rumors that Dr. Blackthorn, the institution's founder, conducted horrific experiments under the guise of treatment. As they approach the rusted iron gates, one of the characters hesitates, overcome by an inexplicable sense of foreboding. The gate creaks open on its own, as if inviting them inside. The skeptic scoffs, dismissing it as the wind, but the others exchange uneasy glances. The camera, if this were a film, lingers on the asylum's facade, the peeling paint forming grotesque patterns that almost resemble screaming faces. The moment they cross the threshold, the temperature drops. A flicker of movement catches the corner of someone's eye, a shadow darting down a hallway, but when they turn, there's nothing. The door slams shut behind them with a thunderous crash, sealing them inside. The flashlight beams dance across the decaying walls, revealing patient graffiti, scratched pleas for help, nonsensical ramblings, and ominous warnings like, "He's still here, and don't let him touch your mind." This opening scene sets the tone for the entire story. Oppressive atmosphere, psychological unease, and the slow realization that Blackthorn Asylum is not just abandoned. It's waiting for them. The storm outside intensifies, trapping them within its walls, while something far worse stirs in the darkness within. The heavy door groans as it swings open, revealing a corridor swallowed by shadows. The air inside is thick with the scent of mildew and something darker, old medicine, rust, and the faint metallic tinge of dried blood. The beam of the flashlight cuts through the dust-choked darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper stained with water damage and handprints that look too fresh to belong to the decades-old decay. The group steps forward cautiously, their footsteps echoing too loudly in the hollow silence. The floorboards groan beneath them, as if the building itself is protesting their intrusion. To their left, a row of patient rooms yawns open, doors hanging crookedly on broken hinges. Inside, rusted bed frames sit bolted to the floor, their thin mattresses rotted away, leaving only stained springs behind. One of the investigators reaches out, running a gloved hand over the deep scratches gouged into the wall beside a bed, long, frantic marks, as though someone had clawed at the plaster in terror. A sudden draft whispers through the hallway, carrying with it a murmur, just a breath of sound, almost like a sigh. The skeptic stiffens, insisting it's just the wind, but the believer's face pales. They've all heard the stories. The asylum wasn't just a place of suffering, it was a place where the suffering never ended. Further down the hall, they find a nurse's station, its wooden counter littered with yellowed patient files. The historian picks one up, the paper brittle under their fingers. The name at the top is nearly faded, but the notes are disturbingly clear. Patient 37, no improvement. Subject continues screaming about the hands in the walls, recommending further electroshock therapy. Another file mentions a patient who gouged out their own eyes after claiming they saw what the doctor was doing to the others. The words send a chill through the group. Then a noise, a sharp, metallic clang from deeper inside the asylum. They freeze. The sound had come from nowhere, as if something had been dropped or knocked over. The skeptic moves forward, determined to prove it's just the building settling, but as they round the corner, their flashlight flickers. For just a second, the beam catches a figure at the end of the hall, a pale, emaciated shape in a tattered hospital gown, standing perfectly still. Then the light steadies, and the figure is gone. The believer's breath comes fast. We're not alone in here. The words hang in the air, undeniable now. The asylum is watching them, and whatever is left inside has no intention of letting them leave. The staircase to the upper floors groans under their weight, each step sagging dangerously, as if resisting their ascent. The air grows heavier the higher they climb, thick with the scent of old leather and something sharper, formaldehyde maybe, or the lingering sting of antiseptic gone sour. A single door at the end of the hall stands slightly ajar, the nameplate hanging crookedly. Dr. Elias Blackthorn, chief physician. Pushing the door open feels like disturbing a tomb. The office is frozen in time, a mahogany desk layered with dust, shelves lined with medical journals, and a cracked leather chair that still bears the impression of its long-gone occupant. The walls are adorned with framed diplomas and faded photographs of stern-faced staff, their eyes seeming to track the intruders as they move. The historian steps forward first, drawn to the desk. A ledger lies open, its pages filled with meticulous, spidery handwriting. At first glance, it appears to be routine patient notes, dosages, treatments, progress reports. But the further they read, the more the entries twist. Patient number 114 exhibits continued resistance to treatment. The voices in her head grow louder. I have prescribed hydrotherapy, but if this fails, we will proceed with transorbital lobotomy. The demon inside her cannot be allowed to fester. Another entry, dated weeks later, simply states, patient number 114 is silent at last. A shudder runs through the group. The believers' hands tremble as they pull open the desk drawer, revealing a collection of rusted surgical tools, tree fiends, bone drills, a speculum with dark stains still clinging to its hinges. The skeptic, for once, has no sarcastic remark. Then the historian notices something. A section of the bookshelf doesn't quite align with the rest. A gentle tug reveals a hidden compartment, its contents spilling onto the floor. A series of leather-bound journals, their pages crammed with frantic scribbles and arcane symbols. The doctor's private writings. The treatments are not enough. The corruption is not of the mind, but of the soul. I have seen them. The shadows that cling to the patients, whispering. They must be purged. By steel, by fire, by any means necessary. A floorboard creaks behind them. The group whirls around, but the doorway is empty. Yet the temperature in the room plummets, their breath frosting in the air. The desk drawer slams shut on its own. And then, from somewhere deep in the asylum, a voice echoes. A man's voice, calm and measured, reciting a familiar phrase. Do not fear the knife. It is the only path to purity. The words are from the ledger. Dr. Blackthorn's words, and they weren't spoken by anyone in the room. The flickering beam of the flashlight carved erratic shapes across the tiled walls of the treatment room as the group stepped inside. The air here was different, thicker, heavier, like the atmosphere just before a lightning strike. A rusted gurney sat bolted to the center of the floor, its leather restraints hanging in tatters. Along the walls, cabinets with cracked glass displayed rows of sinister instruments, syringes crusted with age, coils of wire that might have once conducted electricity, and jars of murky liquid containing unidentifiable floating shapes. The skeptic reached out to examine a piece of equipment, but the moment their fingers brushed the metal, a jolt of static snapped through the air. They yanked their hand back with a curse, just as the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath misted in front of them, and the believer's eyes widened in dawning horror. "Did you hear that?" At first, it was just a whisper. A faint, rasping voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Then, the gurney's restraints twitched, the buckles rattling as if someone invisible had just tested their strength. A shadow moved in the corner. Not a trick of the light, not a figment of imagination. A shape, hunched and emaciated, slumped against the wall. Its head lolled unnaturally to one side, and when it turned to face them, the eye sockets were hollow, dripping with something black and viscous. The air filled with the scent of burning flesh. The believer staggered back, choking on a scream. The skeptic stood frozen, their rational mind scrambling for an explanation, even as the thing in the corner twitched, its limbs jerking in a grotesque parody of movement. Then, a voice, guttural and wet, as if forced through ruined vocal cords. "Help me." The lights above them flickered to life with a sudden, blinding burst of electricity, buzzing and spitting like a dying animal. For one horrifying second, the room was illuminated in full. The gurney was no longer empty. A gaunt figure, strapped down, its mouth stretched in a silent scream, writhed against the restraints. The descent into the basement was like stepping into the belly of a corpse. The wooden stairs sagged beneath their weight, each creak a protest from the rotting bones of the asylum. The air grew thick with the stench of damp earth and something older, copper, burnt hair, the cloying sweetness of decay. Their flashlight beams cut through the gloom, revealing walls streaked with dark, irregular stains that branched like veins across the concrete. At the bottom, a rusted iron door stood slightly ajar, its surface etched with symbols that made the historian's blood run cold. Not medical diagrams, not anything scientific. Sigils. The believer reached out, fingers hovering just above the markings. "This isn't just an asylum," they whispered. "It's a temple." The door groaned open on its own. Inside, the chamber stretched low and wide, the ceiling strung with cobwebs so thick they looked like burial shrouds. Candles, some ancient and melted down to stubs, others disturbingly fresh, lined the walls, their wax pooling into grotesque shapes on the floor. At the center of the room, a stone slab dominated the space, its surface stained a deep, unnatural black. The skeptic stepped forward, boots sticking slightly to the floor. "That's not rust," they muttered, shining their light down. The entire floor was tacky, glistening faintly where the light hit it. Old blood. Too much of it. The historian moved to the slab, their breath hitching as they saw the restraints. Thick leather straps, the buckles still fastened as if whatever had been tied down had simply vanished. But it was the markings on the stone that made their stomach twist. Names, dozens of them, carved in jagged, frantic strokes. Patient 14, Patient 22, Patient 87, and beneath them all, a single phrase, gouged so deep it had cracked the stone. "They are not sick, they are doorways." A gust of wind howled through the chamber, impossible this far underground, and the candles flared to life, their flames burning an eerie, sickly green. From the shadows behind the slab, something shifted. A shape, tall and emaciated, draped in a stained doctor's coat. Its fingers, too long, too many joints, trailed along the stone as it stepped into the flickering light. The face was wrong. The face was moving. Skin rippled like liquid, features melting and reforming. A dozen different patients, a dozen different screams, all trapped beneath the surface of that shifting nightmare mask. It spoke with Doctor Blackthorn's voice. "You've come for treatment." The fluorescent lights in the asylum's hallway flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls like living things. The air had grown thick, not just with dust and decay, but with something heavier, something that clung to the back of their throats and made each breath feel like swallowing broken glass. The believer was the first to break. Their hands trembled violently as they clutched at the straps of their backpack, eyes darting to every shifting shadow. "Did you see that?" they whispered, voice fraying at the edges. "There's something following us. It's breathing down my neck." The skeptic scoffed, but it lacked their usual bite. Their knuckles were white around the flashlight, and sweat beaded along their hairline despite the creeping cold. "It's just the wind," they muttered. "Or the pipes. Old buildings make noise, that's all." But then the skeptic's flashlight flickered, and in that split second of darkness, something brushed against their arm. They whirled around, heart hammering, nothing there, except a whisper, so close it could have been inside their own skull. "You don't believe in us?" The skeptic staggered back, face draining of color. Across the hall, the historian let out a choked gasp. Their notebook slipped from numb fingers, pages splayed open to reveal frantic, incoherent scribbles, none of which they remembered writing. The words spiraled into madness over and over. "He's watching through the walls. He's watching through the walls. He's watching." And then, the worst of it. The believer's voice, small and broken. "Where's Alex?" Silence. The group turned, counting heads. 4 had entered the asylum. Now there were only 3. No one had heard Alex leave. No one had heard a scream. Just gone. Vanished between one flicker of the lights and the next. The skeptic's rationality shattered like glass. "We need to get out!" they roared, voice cracking with terror. But the hallway behind them, the one that had led to the entrance, was no longer there. In its place stretched an endless corridor, doors warping and melting like wax, the walls pulsing as if the asylum itself were breathing. And from the darkness ahead, a new sound, the slow, dragging footsteps of something that was no longer pretending to hide. The walls of the asylum seemed to pulse around them as they stumbled into the overgrown courtyard, their flashlights cutting through the swirling mist that clung to the dead earth. The storm had worsened outside, thunder growling like a beast in the distance, but here, in this desolate patch of land surrounded by crumbling brick, the air was unnaturally still. Then the believer's foot caught on something, not a root, not a stone, a bone. The beam of their flashlight dropped, illuminating a pale, skeletal hand jutting from the soil. Fingers curled, as if the dead had tried and failed to claw their way out. The historian staggered back, but it was too late. The light swept wider, revealing more, dozens more. The courtyard wasn't just earth and weeds, it was a mass grave. Skulls peered up from the dirt, jaws slack in eternal screams. Rib cages rose like broken cages from the soil, some still draped in tattered asylum gowns. Tiny bones, children's bones, lay tangled among the rest. The smell hit them then, not the musty decay of old death, but something fresher, fouler, as if the earth itself was still digesting its victims. The skeptic fell to their knees, retching. The historian's voice was hollow. They never released anyone, did they? A gust of wind moaned through the asylum's broken windows, carrying with it a chorus of whispers, names, pleas, sobs, all rising from the dirt beneath their feet. And then the ground moved. Fingers, blackened and rotting, burst from the soil, grasping at their ankles. A skeletal face, clumps of hair still clinging to its scalp, erupted from the earth with a wet, tearing sound, its lipless mouth stretched in a silent howl. The believer screamed, just as the asylum's doors slammed shut behind them, trapped, outside, with the dead, and something else. From the shadows of the asylum's upper windows, a figure watched, smiling. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.